Last week, I looked at the idea of what dividends are, what the legal rules are for paying dividends, and also the director's loan account. I also mentioned there is documentation and paperwork that should be generated when dividends are paid out. And in this week's video, that's what I'm going to be covering. Now, having looked at what the idea of what dividends are and how they connect to, how they go hand in hand with the DLA, the director's loan account, let's talk about something that is really just as vital, just as critical, but it tends to get overlooked, and that's the paperwork. Proper documentation, which is your responsibility as a company director, ensures not only are dividends legal, but they also keep our friends with the tax authorities, HMRC, happy. And who doesn't want that for themselves? Now let's recap the legal rules for declaring dividends and supplement that based on what we picked up from last week. Now, to pay dividends, it's critical that you follow a clear process, and ignoring the paperwork could bite you in the backside later on with the HMRC and other authorities as well. Your dividend payment may be questioned, they could be classified as illegal, and if they are classified in that respect, you may have to reimburse and pay that money to the company. That tends to be an issue if your company has financial problems and it ends up going into liquidation or being wound up, then that could actually bite you very severely. So firstly, check your profits levels. Dividends, remember, can only be paid if there are enough profits after tax to pay them out. If you don't make profits, forget dividends. Using up-to-date accounts information, again, a little shout out for digital accounting, preference being 0, will tell you whether you've got adequate reserves or profits or not. Number 2, declare that dividend. It doesn't mean taking a megaphone, but it means you've got to be formally declaring those dividends, even if you happen to be the only director and shareholder of your company. What that means is you hold a board meeting, doesn't have to be in any plush offices, even a virtual one will suffice. And then you've got to create the requisite documents. So what are those documents? What's the paperwork that you'll actually need? Now, for each dividend that you declare, there are 2 key documents that you need to create. And if you don't want to create them, by the way, we do that as a company secretarial service. Give me a shout and we can talk you through that. So first of all, have minutes. These are called board meeting minutes, and they're a formal record of your decision as a director or directors plural to make that decision to declare a dividend. Typically, those director minutes will include the date the meeting took place, the names of the parties present, how much you're including as the dividend to be declared, and also confirmation that your company has sufficient post-tax profits to cover that payment. The second document that typically gets created with that is called a dividend voucher. Now, it can be stored virtually, can be electronic, but a voucher nevertheless is normally good practice to generate. Now, a dividend voucher is like a receipt for the dividend payment. Normally good to have that in your tax records, and a voucher typically includes the following: the date the payment was made, brackets declared, the name of the company that's making that payment. If you want to be posh, call it a distribution. The name of the recipient shareholder or shareholders who are receiving that dividend. How much is being paid over or declared. How many shares that you as a shareholder hold, or how many shares the shareholders that you're paying it to hold as well. So you may be the director making that declaration for a number of shareholders. Now, each shareholder that is in receipt of that dividend should be given a copy of the dividend voucher. The company should keep a record and a copy of that voucher, as well as keeping a record of the director minutes. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, well, that sounds like too much like hard work. Why does it really matter? Why should we bother with paperwork? Why don't we just do it? And again, it's not unheard of. I've seen it happen quite a lot in practice, that companies will make those dividend declarations without the paperwork to support it. Well, without proper records, you're in breach of some compliance. HMRC could and do question as to whether your dividends are legitimate, and if dividends are found to be illegal, i.e. you haven't got profits to back those up, then you may need to repay that money back to the company. And if you spent it, that's going to be quite challenging. It minimises and avoids confusion. The clarity of the documentation, to me, makes life easier, not just for yourself, but also for your accountant, and also ensures the accuracy of the tax returns itself. Now, what's the practical steps we should adopt for declaring those dividends? Well, let me summarise this in a simple step-by-step process. Number one, check your account records to confirm post-tax profits. Typically, management accounts are good. Having digital accounts like Xero means you can have a look as long as the records are up to date where you stand. Number two, hold a board meeting. Doesn't matter physically where it's held, it can be virtual. Formally declare that dividend. Even if you are still the sole director, I recommend it as good practice to do that nevertheless. Thirdly, prepare that paperwork. Write up the board minutes, issue a dividend voucher to each shareholder, and pay the dividend accordingly. Remember, dividends can be declared, so you might pay those later on down the track. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, this sounds too much like hard work. What happens if we just forget the paperwork and skip the formalities? Well, the risk is, and it's always a risk, so depending on your risk appetite, it's a risk you may wish to take. I wouldn't recommend it myself. If you skip the formalities and don't declare the dividends properly, then effectively HMRC, if you're subject to an investigation or your returns are closely looked at, could see that payment as a salary. In the world of HMRC, people follow the rules and people have the paperwork and documentation. What that means is if it is indeed classified as a salary, income tax, national insurance, interest and penalties will follow on top. If the company doesn't have profits to justify that dividend, the payment could be classified as a legal dividend. Remember, you're not going to go to prison, but it does have some consequences nevertheless. Now, don't get me wrong, dividends are a great way to extract profits from your business. The tax implications of that we will have a look at in another video, but they've got to be handled correctly. Proper paperwork, including board minutes and dividend vouchers, is, in my opinion, essential to stay on top of it, stay compliant and avoid those costly mistakes. Now, if you don't have that system in your business and you think, what do I need to do to get it right? Then speak to your accountant or give us a call and see where we can help you out. And remember, folks, a little planning later will save a lot of aggravation down the line. Plan it, do it, profit.